Okay. Greetings, brothers and sisters. Bunch of political stuff to get into. I want to start off this with the rigged NBA lottery. And so the Dallas Mavericks won the lottery of Cooper Flagg, who's supposed to be a generational talent and maybe a ready to go rookie who's already, ready to play and contribute in his first year, certainly probably his second year, to a team that made this horrific trade of Luka Doncic, but still had enough talent to be, a possible NBA champion. And they were only 2 years removed from, or 1 year removed from being in the NBA Finals. And so they had a 1.8% chance of getting this pick. And there are many teams that had 14 plus percent chance, right? And so, it's if there's anything in sports that's rigged, which of course there is, the NBA lottery is one of them. So it used to be in all the other sports, all the other major sports leagues, there is a whoever has the most losses gets the number one draft pick, unless they've traded that pick away. But in general, that's how it works. So if you suck the worst, then you get the first pick in the upcoming draft, and that provides parity within the league because then the worst team gets the best potential player, the one that people think is going to be the best player. It's not always how it works out, but it's how it happens. And like, for example, Michael Jordan was the fifth pick. Steph Curry was the seventh pick. Some of these guys were Nikola Jokic, who may be the best player ever, is at least stats wise, he was in the second round, right? So it doesn't always work out that way. But sometimes, the first pick is a generational player like Victor Wembanyama, who was the first pick 2 drafts ago. Now, the San Antonio Spurs, they got the first pick, which was David Robinson, a center who played for Navy. He was in the Navy and he grew like 6 inches. You're not supposed to be over 6'4" in the Navy, but somehow David Robinson outgrew. He grew to 7 feet tall, and they should have kicked him out of the Navy, but they kept him there for 4 years and didn't allow him to be drafted, even though he was clearly the best player in college basketball. And San Antonio got to draft him. And after about 10 years of having him, a quality player, they were trying to get the citizens of San Antonio to build them a new stadium. And as miracles would have it, they won the draft lottery. And the way the draft lottery works is they take the worst 14 teams, the teams that don't make the playoffs, and they put them in a lottery system. And if you have, they put more balls in the, they have balls with your logo on it, and and it's a closed door thing. Nobody's there to watch it. It's a completely closed door thing. And so the Utah Jazz had the best chance of winning the lottery. So the Utah Jazz had a 14% chance, and some other teams had similar odds. And so they would have representation of the amount of ping pong balls in the lottery thing. And Dallas would have a 1.8%. The Utah Jazz would have a 14% of the balls in the lottery thing, and the Dallas Mavericks would have a 1.8 chance, however they do that, right? And the San Antonio Spurs, back when they were trying to build a stadium, somehow won the first pick and picked Tim Duncan and went on to win, I believe, 4 championships with him over his career. And they built the stadium, right? And people started to call bullshit on the lottery then. Because what the lottery was supposed to do is prevent tanking, where teams would purposefully lose to get the number one pick, especially if their number one pick was some generational talent. But they tank anyway. It's been happening. They've been tanking. And then they up the way that the lottery works to less incentivized tanking. And now the first 4 picks were teams that have the potential to be championship caliber, at least competitive playoff teams, and these shitty teams that have been, some of them have sucked, for generations, and they're the kind of teams that can't win over free agents. Like, free agents aren't going to go to play there. They have to draft talent. They don't really have the option of signing some big superstar, because superstars don't want to play in Utah and Portland and some of these other places. And so the Dallas Mavericks, of course, trade away Luka Doncic would look fake as fuck. Like, it made no sense, and they got a shitty deal. They got an aging, often injured Anthony Davis, another player, and like maybe a pick, and it's not even a good pick. Where there are players that are much like not nearly as good as Luka Doncic, who generated 4 first-round draft picks and players. Mikal Bridges of the New York Knicks, Rudy Gobert of the Utah Jazz, Donovan Mitchell. These players generated a windfall of picks and players and things. And, it was almost an even swap for Anthony Davis, who's like, I think 6 or 7 years older than Luka Doncic, and, all these things. And there always needs to be a competitive team in LA. That's a big, the number one basketball franchise, and, a very big market, and it's, it's LA, and it's the whole thing. The Lakers. And with LeBron James retiring, they weren't going to be relevant for some time. They've given away a lot of draft assets. They don't have a way of rebuilding. And so Luka Doncic drops in their lap, and they immediately are going to be, if not in the championship contention, at least in the playoffs every year. And they have one of the best players on their team. And so it didn't make any sense. And there was all these speculations that the people who had bought the franchise from Mark Cuban, who are, own casinos in Vegas, want to move the franchise to Vegas, and some of these other things. But now we see that they've been compensated. They gave away a generational talent to get a generational talent. And now, Luka Doncic, who is going to be on a supermax contract, they get a rookie who's going to be on a rookie deal, which is and it just shows you how, and it's so obviously rigged, right? That the Dallas Mavericks made this incredibly bad decision. That the fans, the guy who made the trade, had to hire security. People were showing up at his house. They were chanting "Fire Nico" at the arena. And now all of a sudden they have Cooper Flag, who everybody wanted. San Antonio Spurs, they also got Victor Wembanyama, who wanted to play for San Antonio because a couple of French players, particularly Tony Parker, who was his mentor, played for them. And the French people, really, their number one NBA team is San Antonio Spurs because of the French players they've had there over the years. And particularly Tony Parker, who won some championships with Tim Duncan. And so, it's like it's a way to rig the system, and it just keeps these shitty franchises from ever, they just seem to never get and even though when they do get a top pick, they seem to pick the wrong player. And, you could say it's bad luck and other things, mismanagement. But, when we live in a world of rigged stuff, it's, highly suspect. Okay, so this happened as well, which I thought was kind of interesting. Jason Tatum.
And the Celtics call timeout, grabbing that right ankle.
It looks like Jason Tatum popped his Achilles. Now, Jason Tatum's a really nice guy. My wife and I watched the Netflix special about 5 NBA players: LeBron, Jimmy Butler, Jason Tatum, that dude that plays for Sacramento. I can't think of his name. He's whatever it is. And who did I forget? That guy plays for the Minnesota Timberwolves, Anthony Edwards. And Jason Tatum has a kid named Deuce, like he's a single dad kind of thing. I don't know how it works. And they were very annoying. He's just a nice guy, but very effeminate and soft-spoken. He's kind of like the opposite of the arrogant, asshole athletes. And for whatever reason, we just didn't like him. Like, my wife and I were making comments, but he pops his Achilles, it looks like, and hasn't been confirmed yet. And the Knicks, who hadn't beaten the Celtics in years, Celtics dominated them in the regular season. The Knicks hadn't beat a winning team in the regular season. Handed won 2 games by epic comebacks in the fourth quarter in Boston, and they were about to win this game. They're up 3-1, and the Celtics are kind of shell-shocked. And then Jason Tatum has this injury where he looks like he pops his Achilles. And, it didn't look like anything, right? He's a younger player. I mean, usually these things happen when a player has, some other injuries ankle injuries that lead to calf injuries and things that lead to the Achilles rupturing. And again, it hasn't been confirmed, but that's what it looks like. It's better be that because he left in a wheelchair. I mean, Aaron Rodgers walked off where he was carried off. It almost looked fake, right? But the reason I'm covering this is because I was watching the Golden State Warriors game following this game, and there was this commercial.
Superman is taking the day off. Who do you think should sub in for Superman? Who's got it like Superman?
Who's going to fill in for Superman? Who's going to sub in for Superman?
Who could possibly match Superman's speed, strength, and ability to fly? I want to talk about.
So they do these things now where they have a movie trailer and they merge it with some athlete and some sports thing. And then they run the commercial on, it's like the synchronicity thing.
How about Jason Tatum?
Do you guys see Tatum in Clark Kent mode? Tatum is Clark Kent, humble, Midwestern, looks great in glasses. But can he step up and be Superman?
I don't know, can he? I think not, because he popped his Achilles and he squirmed and rolled around the ground and cried like a little girl. And then had to be wheeled off in a wheelchair. So it was bizarre to see this ad right after his... Boom! Is Superman. Okay, so I thought that was interesting. When the draft lottery became so fake last night, with the whole thing, the rigging for the Dallas Mavericks, then you have to question everything else, right? Because if one thing's fake, then everything's potentially fake. Not that, there hasn't been questionable things before, there always is. But when it happens, again, this is the rigging of the system, right? The thing where everything is manipulated and contrived. It just makes everything, nothing's natural or organic. It just makes everything icky. They clearly want the dopey Trumpers to still like Trump. Like they're giving Trump cover. I got a bunch of stuff
Securing another
here.
win.
Here it is.
Announcing a major tariff deal with China. Trade will be one of the major issues on the agenda. When the president makes his will be one of the major issues on the agenda. When the president makes his high stakes trip and the first one to the
Wait, where's the thing here? China lowers its tariffs from 125% to 10%. U.S. lowers its tariffs 145% to 30%. And so,
major issues on the agenda. When the president makes his high stakes trip and the first one to the Middle East, he's going overseas today. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt joins us now. Caroline, we're just mentioning there's probably...
I don't know what's wrong with my internet today, but everything's cloudy, which, whatever.
7 major stories. I know I'm going to disappoint somebody by not bringing it up. First off, your reaction, and what could you tell us about the China deal that has tariffs dropping from 145, 125 respectively,
All right, let me see if I can fix the internet thing here.
to 30 and 10.
This is an extraordinary first step in the right direction. And thanks to the strength of President Trump, Secretary Bessent and Ambassador Greer were able to cut this initial deal with China. China agreed to reduce their tariffs on the United States by 115%. They also agreed to continue having discussions about opening
Okay, so
Chinese markets to American-made products and goods. And they also agreed to continue seriously discussing the grave impact that Chinese-produced fentanyl is having right here in the United States and our people. So this...
Okay, so a few things here. The number one thing is this is a Trump-created problem. China didn't want to have tariffs. China certainly doesn't want tariffs on their goods. China has deals with multiple corporations and small businesses in America to manufacture goods for those companies. And China makes a lot of money by importing things to America. China really didn't care about having tariffs for American stuff because they win the import-export business with America, right? The trade deficit with America. And so China didn't want this at all, right? Unless they wanted to fuck America, which would be to destroy America's economy, which they obviously at this particular time don't want to do. And really, you know, they would be taking them down. They're taking themselves down. Now, Trump did this without like really being realistic about what's going on in the world. And he just sees the trade imbalance and he thinks that, you know, Americans can suck it up and not either pay American prices for what's happening with, you know, did I read that comment? I think I already did, where the person said, you know, that Chinese prices have to go up so Americans can compete, American companies can compete, and that's, you know, what Trump thinks as well. So, you know, with inflation going down, which is like a miracle, to its lowest since 2021, Trump is getting all kinds of good news and the stock market's back up because of the whole thing, right? And, you know, he's a complete imbecile. Because what he said, and nobody ever holds Trump accountable for his many proclamations, because he lies all the time and he makes these statements and then he backs off them completely. Like lock Hillary up, which he said, you know, at every rally, he encouraged the people who were chanting lock her up, and then after the election, no, you know, that played well before. And then he comes out years later saying he didn't want to lock her up because it was a bad look to lock up the former First Lady and former Secretary of State, but he could have, meaning he gave her a break and he could have locked Hillary up, which the Republicans were counting on him doing and which he pandered to them about. But, you know, he's just one of these guys that bullshits all the time, and so no one takes what he says seriously. But Trump said he was going to get rid of the trade deficit and bring manufacturing back to America, and that was the goal of this thing. And, you know, he can now say that he was just bullshitting about that to get better trade deals. But these better trade deals are going to tank a lot of small businesses. Trump already fucked all these small businesses over when he shut down the economy. When he got, you know, baited into shutting it down because it cost him his second term, which of course now he's, you know, he has it later. I gotta drink my throat coat tea here. But, you know, the guy just doesn't, he's clearly incompetent mentally. And he's not a good businessman. But somehow he keeps on getting bailed out, right? And, you know, at least for his supporters. And so the Americans will only react when they start having to suffer. And so with the inflation going down, you know, with all the effects of these decisions not showing any kind of, you know, something that would freak Americans out. But with him closing down the economy, and he got worked by COVID, and now what he's done here, with a lot of small businesses getting hurt by this, even this just intermediary, you know, this small period of time where he's making it hard for China to export things to America. And so a lot of small businesses will go under because they're barely making it. The ones that barely survived COVID, and Trump fucked them again. And, you know, small businesses, Trump said, who cares about small business? I'm talking about car manufacturers. And you guys can go without your Barbie dolls. Like, he doesn't give a shit about you. The people he cares about have money and power. And, of course, himself more than anybody else.
This is a great first step for the American public, and Secretary Bessent, Ambassador Greer, and, of course, President Trump will continue.
She's like kind of like one of these up with people, you know, fake Christians who's like really bitchy but pretends to be nice. Cheerleader that's like always positive and has all this school spirit and shit. Fucking is so annoying. And, you know, when the Trumpers lap it up, you know, it's just so bad.
Negotiations with China so we can hopefully inevitably get to a fair and comprehensive big trade deal.
Do you know yet, Caroline, if they're going to unfreeze their rare earth and the magnets that we use for our technical equipment, as well as our military equipment.
I do understand that was part of the discussion, but I also know that...
Yeah, she said that they're now willing to discuss these other things. Like, I think China knows that Trump's fucked. And I think Trump knows he's fucked. And they're going to call whatever deal they get, even if it's a worse deal than the deal before, a victory. That's what Trump does. He calls everything a victory. The media will cover how it's not, but no one watches them anyway. And then they'll just move on to the next thing, right? I mean, he's like a Teflon boy, you know, and I don't give a shit. Like I said, the system's collapsing. I mean, I guess for me, anything that prolongs the collapse, I mean, just because I'm not ready, you know, like fucking, I don't think I'll ever be ready, but, you know, the longer it goes, the better. But, you know, it's coming. I think I got some more of her fake Christian Barbie truther stuff here. We got more of a fake Christian Barbie truther somewhere in here. I'm just going to go in order. I don't even know how I usually organize these things, but I already completed a video today that I just made public, I believe, and then took a couple of days for me to make. And anyways, let's get into this one with this Birdman woman here.
Habeas corpus is a legal procedure explicitly mentioned in the Constitution. It allows people to challenge the federal government in court if they've been detained. And one of the president's top aides today, Stephen Miller, confirmed publicly that the White House is exploring this extraordinary step.
Well, the Constitution is clear, and that, of course, is the
this guy's just so fucking weaselly.
Supreme law of the land, that the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus can be suspended in a time of invasion. So I would say that's an option we're actively looking at. Look, a lot of it depends on what...
Who are we being invaded by? So they're going to suspend habeas corpus. You know, this is martial law, and they're getting rid of your judicial rights. The Trumpers will fall all over it, thinking this is a good thing, because they're so fucking stupid. You know, this is a bad thing when anybody does it. It's a good thing to have these things. It means they can lock you up without... You know, the court systems are rigged enough as it is, and they're rigged against some people more than others. And getting a fair trial is something of the past. Of course, the media isn't there to help you out either, because they're all bullshit and they're all corporate owned and all that stuff. And so, you know, this should not be happening, especially under Trump. And, you know, there's not some fucking invasion. They've made this crazy, you know, this fake invasion of immigrants. Like, if you are actually suffering, if you personally, like you've lost your job to an immigrant, or you've been robbed by an immigrant, or there's gangs in your neighborhood from immigrant gangs. Like, literally, not some bullshit paranoid fucking neighborhood watch bullshit thing, but like a real thing like that. Then sure, you could say there's a real problem. But other than that, most of us just see the same amount of immigrants that there were 5 years ago. Like, we don't see them. And maybe in certain areas, I don't know. You know, people really have a problem. Some of you guys might really have a problem with immigrants, but it isn't an invasion. They don't give a shit about fentanyl use. Trump didn't give a shit about the opioid crisis when it happened. It's just an excuse he makes. You know, like he's trying to protect Americans from fentanyl. Like, you know, I mean, there's so many ways that they're harming people. He didn't protect Americans from Operation Warp Speed, which is, you know, as bad or worse.
Whether the courts do the right thing or not. At the end of the day, Congress passed a body of law known as the Immigration and Nationality Act, which stripped Article 3 courts, that's the judicial branch, of jurisdiction over immigration cases. So Congress actually passed, it's called jurisdiction stripping legislation. It passed a number of laws that say that the Article 3 courts aren't even allowed to be involved in immigration cases.
No.
So you say that they're doing this for illegal immigrants, and then you're like, well, in 5 years from now when they're doing it to you, and they say, oh, yeah, we got rid of those laws. Well, when did you do that? You know, remember you guys were all upset about the immigrants, and they pretended it was about them, but it was really going to be about you. And they're definitely going to go after truthers and so-called patriots, right-wing people. At some point, you fucking know that they are. They're going to go after lots of people because they're going to be population reduction and whatever else they do here. And so, you know, Birdman woman. See, her face doesn't work right. She's got some plastic surgery. Just look at it like that's... but there's another thing here.
So let's get to questions. Here in our new media seat today is Andrew Egger, the White House correspondent for The Bulwark. The Bulwark is a new media company launched in 2019 with hundreds of thousands of readers on Substack and more than 1 million subscribers on YouTube. Andrew, please kick us off. And thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Caroline. The president posted another ad this week for his Trump meme coin. The group that's running that coin is encouraging people to buy in order to win a dinner this month with the president. Why is the president planning to attend a dinner for the top investors in his coin?
Look, the president is abiding by all conflict of interest laws. The president...
Yeah, when you say something like that, you know that he's trying to push the limits, right? The guy's going to monetize his presidency. Like, everybody should have known that. He was going to make coin, literally now. He's going to make money on some fucking bullshit meme coin, the Trump coin, and all the rest of these things. And there's all this. It was already a pump and dump. It went up it dropped by like 80% after the first 12 hours, which means they pumped and dumped it. And now people are using it to buy access for him. And he has whatever, his market cap, whatever it is now, and all those things is, much bigger than it should be. And, it'll fade like a fucking, drop like a bucket of shit on a rope when he's no longer president. But with her saying that he's abiding by all the laws, that's her saying, like, this is totally a conflict of interest, but we found a way to do it legally, or at least we're skirting the the law.
Is abiding by all conflict of interest laws. The president has been incredibly transparent with his own personal financial obligations throughout the years. The president is a successful businessman, and I think, frankly, it's one of the many reasons that people reelected him back to this office.
There are at least some people who are buying this coin who seem to view it as an opportunity to influence the president's views. There was a logistics company this week that said they would buy $20 million in the coin in order to advocate for free trade between the U.S. and Mexico. If buyers are buying for that reason, are they wasting their money?
Look, I can assure you the president acts with only the interests of the American public in mind, putting
Oh my God, just the fucking fact that people believe this shit, right? He's obviously making as much out of this presidency as he can. He's increased his wealth by billions since he was president the first time. He wasn't even a legitimate billionaire when he got elected, and now he's worth $5 billion. And so, it's just sad. Like,
first in doing what's best for our country.
Boom. So there's another thing coming up here with the airplane.
President Trump now moving forward on a reported plan to get a giant gift for his administration, I guess personally, politically, but then ultimately for himself through his library.
Boom. All right, so Ari Mibla, it's a Mibla, is growing a beard here.
This is a plan to take not $1 million gift or a $10 million thing, but actually $400 million of value from a foreign government through the value of a jet. It is egregious. It is possibly illegal if Congress doesn't approve.
Yeah,
it. You might remember all that talk about the Constitution and the Emoluments Clause, but bottom line, there are also figures on the right who are concerned because, separate from the ethics and the obvious security implications, which we'll get to, this just looks really bad.
Yeah, but Trump don't give a shit, right? He just doesn't matter because it fucking, like, everyone kind of knows he's a scumbag other than his supporters, and nobody can stop him. The powers that be are letting him loose. So, eventually he can fuck America over.
Thirsty, even. So here's the plane. It's from the royal family of Qatar. It is a luxury Boeing 747 jumbo jet. The Trump administration says they would take this jet that you're seeing certain pictures of as a gift, and they would turn it into an Air Force One. And then they would keep it. So they'd use it for a few years. That's the plan that we have according to the reporting. But then Donald
It's just where he can try to bang some porn stars.
Trump would get it afterward as a private citizen. And the way they're finagling that is they say through his library, presidential library, but bottom line, if he's allowed to fly around on the $400 million jet from the foreign government and only gave it to him because he was president of your country.
It's almost a $500 million jet, right?
Which is supposed to be a public interest position. Well, it all looks pretty unseemly. There are questions here.
Pretty unseemly.
about national
All
security.
right, you know, like just classic Trump. And like I said, you know, he's cracked the code on how to cheat the system and how to, you know, and to finagle it and skirt the law and, you know, do all these things. That's what he always does, right? He has a team of lawyers. He tries to find any way around these laws that are there to stop people like him from taking advantage of everybody else. But, you know, he finds a way to do it because he's just that guy, and he ain't going to jail now after the Supreme Court ruled that he's pretty much got immunity from all his illegal bullshit that he does. And, you know, this just looks bad. Like, Trump doesn't give a shit about looking bad. Like, most people just wouldn't do this because they know how it would appear to people. But he just doesn't care. Like, he doesn't care how it appears because he likes to think of himself as a player. He'd rather have people think of himself as a player than worry about them thinking he's a scumbag. Trump cut ties with Netanyahu over alleged manipulation, says Israeli media. So Trump, who's been the greatest friend to Israel of any president, has now Trump cut ties with one of his closest friends, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Here's the reasons cited in reports. So I don't know where this Israeli thing here. But some Israeli papers say that this happened and that Trump is he finally realized he's getting played by Netanyahu. And fucking Jesus Christ. After he did that stupid... Let's see, I have that thing up here. See if I still have it. Is it here? Yep, there it is. You know, he still has this posted. It's got 677,000 views. There they are. Those bearded dudes dancing as Trump's big fucking head. And just all of it, remember? And they were, look at there's the fucking money falling from heaven. There's more of that shit. It's Trump's statue, which is God's a gaudy thing. Elon, and these two fucking fat fucks sitting by a pool. He posted this, right? Him and Netanyahu sitting by some luxury hotel sipping fucking margaritas or whatever the fuck their drinks are. Some effeminate, and you know, and now they're no longer pals because Trump realized the guy's playing them. So that's what's up. The fake Christian Barbie truther here. I knew I had a lot of these things up. You know, I haven't been able to get to all these things because of all the shit that's been happening.
One other question. Yesterday, we saw the news of the new Pope. Before Pope Leo became Pope Leo, there were some critical comments that he made about President Trump and about Vice President Vance on his X account, then X account. Does the White House have any reaction to those comments?
The president made his reaction to Pope Leo's announcement yesterday very clear. He is very proud to have an American Pope. I think it was a surprise to everyone. I saw the news media was surprised to report on that yesterday.
Surprise to everyone. She's a Catholic. Fake Catholic.
But it's a great thing for the United States of America and for the world.
Oh, American Pope, yes. USA. Even though he said Donald Trump was a piece of shit or whatever he said. And, you know, she's caught between her Pope and her president. So here's this guy, Bill Master Gates.
Bill, you've always been, I think, basically an optimist.
I got the best nicknames.
And I would describe myself similarly that, you know, at the end of the day, the trend lines for things like life expectancy and mortality, and they're all going in the right direction. But I think it's fair to say that over the last few years, some of them have plateaued. Extreme poverty, maternal mortality. Is some of your urgency in accelerating the spending because you're worried that some of these trends are not moving in the right direction?
Well, if you look at the 25-year time period, the Gates Foundation gets started in 2000 and becomes the world's biggest then, and we go from spending $1 billion a year to now we're almost at $9 billion. That's the fastest rate of improvement ever in history of reducing childhood death, HIV deaths. You're right that the pandemic and the fiscal situation in Africa.
Okay, so Bill Gates won the Population Award from the UN. And the Population Award is given to somebody who has reduced population. Bill Gates did that TED Talk where he said that we have to, whatever it is, something to innovating to zero was the name of it. I'll go and show you that in a bit. And so part of what he's into is depopulation. But then he says they're doing these things to prevent infant death and all these other things. Overpopulation's a real issue. Like, people in the truth community, some of them don't get it. They've never seen these crowded cities, or they don't understand. Overpopulation always happens in small areas. Like, you can have an overpopulation of kangaroos. It's not a global overpopulation of kangaroos. But we have large cities in prime areas. Like, where do people live? 80% of people live near coastal areas. Rivers, oceans, certainly oceans, lakes, and then rivers and these other places, right? People need to live near water. And, we use it for all the things we use water for, as well as we do shipping and, the things that, all this stuff, transportation, all the things that water is used for. And those are the areas that 90% of all the life on Earth comes from, these marshes and these areas surrounding the ocean areas and things, marshes and areas where small animals, fish and reptiles and things breed. I mean, it's just abundant with life, right? And people are squeezing out all the rest of the species, which we don't have a right to do, and devouring resources, which we don't have a right to do. It's not our God-given right, just because we're smarter and more developed in various ways than other species. We don't have God's permission to just fucking glom everything. And so overpopulation is a real thing, and Bill Gates knows it is. And so they have these bullshit foundations where they look like they're philanthropists, but they're just really, really ways of getting around taxation. If you've ever seen that, all the money in the world, and J. Paul Getty, when he was the richest man in the world, his favorite grandson got kidnapped, and his daughter's begging the guy for money. And he's like, I don't got no money, right? It's all it's all tied up in tax evading foundations and shit. So they don't really even have cash. And they use the foundations to buy themselves private jets and do all these things as a way of skirting, the taxation of your money and all these other things. And so this fucking guy does not have a good heart, right? We all know he's a piece of shit. And so he's not a philanthropist. Like, he's not giving his money away to fucking poor people and shit. I mean, whatever he's doing here, he's always involved on the wrong side of everything, right?
The debts there meant that the last 4 or 5 years had not been as good. If the world remains generous, which is at risk, I think the next 20 years we can make even more progress. Asia's distinguished itself, and so as those poverty numbers have gone down, you're left with the challenge mostly in Africa. And there are some things that are going to be tougher, but the innovations will overcome those difficulties if we stay true to this cause.
And
what cause is that, Bill? Why are your hands in your pockets, you freak?
The enormous amount you're giving, you cannot make up the declines in government funding, right? You can be confident about this, right? That if government fundings in the Western world for foreign aid keep declining or even stay where they are, you're going to have millions and millions, tens of millions of people dying.
Absolutely. We'll see a reversal instead of going from the 10 million children dying a year.
They all know there's an overpopulation problem. He literally talks about it, that we have to reduce the population. And he jokes about it in that talk. We'll go to it in a second. But then he comes up here and says, we don't want children to die. What are you talking about? You totally do. Children dying and old people dying are the two number ones. I mean, old people dying just because they're glomming onto too many resources, especially in America. But children dying in these poor countries is the way to reduce the population more than anything else, right? And, then, and the other thing would be infertility. But, that's what they're pushing for and have been for years.
The 5 million.
He drops condoms out of planes. Like the guys push for all these condoms and all these things and education and you're trying to reduce the population that way and forced abortions and some of these other things. He's advocated for all those things. And yet now he's trying to save the kids that once they've been born. They all want depopulation because it's bad for everybody, especially the poor. Because the poor suffer even more with the population explosion.
It's going to go back up, and so we're going to lose millions of lives. And a poignant milestone for that will be the Gavi, the group that buys vaccines for these poor countries.
Oh yeah, those things are, they're saving lives left and right.
That 80% of that has been rich world governments, 20% is Gates Foundation. If that 80% is substantially cut, that alone will lead to lots more deaths. So we are definitely...
It's crazy. We just want to save lives.
In a global health emergency because the European budgets are being cut and the proposal in the U.S. is very dramatic. It's not only has money been...
I'm going to have to pay for this depopulation all on my own, right?
Cut. In fact, by the executive branch, they're proposing that the Congress...
anyways, look at him. Look, this doesn't look like a guy who's... this guy who was he got sued for... The government gave him all kinds of money to get the computer business going, to develop Microsoft. They gave him a ton of money, and they say, just don't form a monopoly. But then he did this thing where he put out his shitty browser that came loaded on his computers, which created a monopoly in the browser war. And then he fucked over Mozilla, who has a much better, Firefox has a much better browser. There's a whole thing there. He got sued and lost. He got sued in Europe and lost. He did all these things that they said he had a monopoly, but he's told not to do that. And he agreed not to do that. And it's because he's a piece of shit. He's a greedy piece of shit and selfish and a hoarder. But now he wants to save everybody's lives, even though... Let's go to the other video here. So carbon emissions are a people problem, right?
Rapidly rising to falling and falling all the way to zero. This equation has 4 factors, a little bit of multiplication. So you've got a thing on the left, CO2, that you want to get to zero.
So you want to get this to zero. So these are the causes that are, preventing it from going to zero, the carbon emissions.
And that's going to be based on the number of people, the services each person's using on average, the energy on average for each service, and the CO2 being put out per unit of energy. So let's look at each one of these and see how we can get this down to zero. Probably one of these numbers is going to have to get pretty near to zero. That's back from high school.
And they're starting on people, right? So they're all laughing because, people, getting rid of people would create a lot of the other things these other ones to reduce, right? Because, there would be less people that you would need to generate carbon emissions for, right? And so, he's saving lives at the same time he's trying to reduce population. Which is it, Bill, right?
School algebra. But let's take a look. First, we've got population. The world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, health care, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%.
Okay, like what did he say there? Like shit on it there. 3 things.
Look, first we've got population. The world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, health care, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%.
Okay, so reproductive health services, which would be forced abortions or whatever it is, abortions, whatever it is, vaccines, and health care would all reduce the population by 15%. So he says we should reduce it by 15%. But now he's saving money. Now he's spending money to save his own money in such a generous way to save really poor people's kids from dying, right? Who are going to suffer their whole lives. And I'm not saying what he should do or not do, right? I'm just talking about the hypocrisy here. The population, which we know is an issue, and these poor people that have more and more kids, then the poverty just grows, right? It becomes the small amount of money that poor people have, like as a block. They have whatever amount of resources, and with more population, then they have to work shittier jobs, right? Because there's not a supply issue. There's for laborers, right? There's not a demand issue, so they can just pay them shit, right? Like there's no demand for workers. There's plenty of supply, so there's no demand, and so they have, they get paid even less, and they're even more expendable.
But there we see an increase of about 1.3. The second factor is the services we use.
All right, so that's that, right? He's the guy wants to reduce the population, and he wants to reduce it in these areas that he's been focusing on, and he wants to use vaccines, healthcare, and reproductive services to drop the population by only 15%. He was upset that wasn't going to be enough, and then yet he's being a philanthropist saving lives. Like, this doesn't add up, right? Transgender Navy vet, this person here, challenges Scott Jennings on military ban.
The main argument, Elena, that the Trump administration is making here is that that allowing transgender troops to serve hurts lethality and it hurts readiness. What do you say to that?
Well, there's no evidence of that. I think that, if that was the case, we've seen transgender people serving honorably for the last several years. And what has changed?
This guy is actually, I think, gay.
Between now and then. They've just
regardless of what he says, right?
Up to a new administration who has a different outlook on their ability to serve. So I think that, if you talk to people who are serving on active duty alongside transgender troops, they're not making these complaints. The leaders in the military are not making these complaints. These are political complaints about military service. So I think that all of the
troops can't make these complaints. Let's be clear. They're not free to make these complaints. I'm not saying they would, but I'm sure some of them would. Like, you're making it sound like they would if they can make complaints about this.
That have looked at this issue and looked at it, and said there's nothing in fact to back up what the government is claiming here. In fact, the judges challenged them to produce evidence, and they couldn't produce any evidence. So I think it's a really dark day for our country, where basically we're allowed to discriminate against a class of people.
Scott, if they can't produce evidence that this actually does, in fact, have an impact on readiness, I mean, how is this not then just discrimination?
Well, it's the opinion of the commander-in-chief, who, according to our Constitution, is the head of the military. I mean, regardless of anyone's opinion or anybody's, whatever side you're on, whether you're for it or against it, at some juncture, the president is the commander-in-chief of the military, and he has and should have broad latitude to determine how the armed forces should be operated. And so I think that's what he's doing here. I think that's ultimately what the court said today, was that the president is the commander-in-chief, and we got to...
All right, this is wherever. Well, let's watch a little bit more, I guess.
Got to respect that.
But I mean, to her point, if there's not a downside, and it's been going on for years now, and I mean, I'm just presenting your argument to them.
Yeah.
What is the argument other than Trump, Hegseth, just doesn't want trans people in the military?
Well, I mean, I think that the president, we'll ultimately see. I think that's why the court is allowing them.
All right, let's move on here. Okay, so more on this Qatari plane thing. Kind of hilarious.
So President Trump is now facing bipartisan backlash for his plans to accept that luxury jet as a gift from the Qatari royal family. In a rare public break from the Trump administration, some of Trump's most vocal and loyal supporters in right-wing media are also now criticizing him, calling this move a stain on his administration even.
He's got plenty of more stains.
CNN's Brian Stelter is tracking this one for us.
Look at Brian fucking Stelter. They gave him a glow. Like, they're using filters now. I showed you they're using filters. I would go show you a before picture, but they got him like with a tan, and they've given him a glow. You're glowing, Brian. And so Brian Stelter, maybe they'll change his voice too. Let's hear his voice here.
And Brian, what are you seeing?
Brian Stelter.
This is the biggest break that I've seen in the first four.
He still has that woman's voice. I showed you there was a Seinfeld guy that looked just like him, a character that they called he had a voice of a woman. It sounds very much like Brian Stelsa. Now, Brian Stelsa was on this show called Reliable Sources that shit all over alternative media and truthers. And it tanked in the ratings because, and even if it was great in the ratings, it's still getting killed by alternative media. Because there's not one show out there, including everything on Fox, that can compete with all the views that alternative media, all the stuff that's done on social media. People get their news from social media now. And that's why they had this thing called Reliable Sources to say, oh, you should get our news from us, not those guys. Don't get their news from those guys. We got the news. We have the news here. And Brian Stelsa was so annoying and unlikable. And these people on CNN all suck, but they have a little niche. Everyone has a niche, right? Everyone can find some group of people that, if you can just articulate your point of view and make quality enough content, an audience can find you. It's harder now because of my video yesterday on YouTube and social media, but there will be somebody out there that would be like, hey, this guy's got it going on, right? Everyone can find some group of people. But how does Brian Stelsa got a group? I mean, Don Lemon's as bad as he sucks, based on his demographics and people who are just as dumb as him. And, Chris Cuomo's got a little bit of a following. And these people, like, she's more of an anchor, Pamela something or other. But, they're all, there's some group of people that they just will appeal to, right? There's some people that, you find your friends, you find groups of people that think like you. Dude, how's Brian Stelsa have anything, How's this guy just not some little troll living under a frickin' bridge somewhere? Hey, fee, fi, fo, fum. I smell the blood of an Englishman.
For months of Trump's return to office, between his pro-Trump propaganda machine, those pro-Trump stars that are always supporting him, and the president. This is a dramatic break, not among every single MAGA media star out there, but among many of them. It's one thing for Democratic lawmakers to be calling this profoundly unethical and possibly illegal. We've heard a lot of that. But some MAGA media commentators are saying the same things. In the past 24 hours, we've heard prominent pro-Trump media stars call this plan to accept a jet from Qatar to use as Air Force One
Qatar?
A, quote, bribe, a grift, and a stain on the administration.
A grift? Of course it's a grift. That's what Trump does.
This is even coming from figures like Laura Loomer, the far-right provocateur, who has a direct line to Trump. I mean, these are people...
Okay, so Laura Loomer, let's see who he has here. He's got people here. Let's see who else. I think, here we go. He's got Ben Shapiro right here.
That's not America first. Please define America first in a way that says you should take sacks of cash from the Qatari royals who are behind...
Speaking of another weird guy with a weird... There's so fucking many weird motherfuckers out there.
Al Jazeera. It just isn't America first in any conceivable way. If you want...
Because this guy's so pro-Israel, and so is Laura Loomer. They're pissed that he's saying fuck you to Netanyahu. He's pissed because Netanyahu and these other people, Laura Loomer, played him on Israel, made him look like a fool, manipulated him. And now he's kind of realizing it. And now he's going over to the Saudis and, getting fucking... I mean... He got a $400 million jet.
President Trump, to succeed, this kind of skeezy stuff needs to stop.
My problem with taking this plane from Qatar is I do not think the President of the United States of America should sit and fly on a plane purchased with the same money used to murder American citizens.
Oh, Jesus Christ. These are pro-Israel guys, and they're all bummed that Trump's bailing on Netanyahu now, after licking his taint for so long. Speaking of taint lickers, Brian Stelsa. So one of the great things about Trump that I really liked about Trump in his first term, and now he sucks so bad it's hard for me to like anything about him. But one of the great things is it's so fucked up he took it. It's so sleazy. It's such a grift. So what he's done here, he's taken, from a royal family, Qataris and all the abuse that goes with it, whatever they're doing. They're like a fucking cartel over there, right? All the fucking ways that they're on the wrong side of things. And even if these were great people, it's clearly a fucking, you get $400 million luxury jet from people. just don't give you something like that, you know. Like you have to, like, they're buying something from you. And what's great about Trump, and there's not really anything great about Trump anymore, but every one of these other motherfuckers wish they could do what Trump did, because he's not only taking the jet and going, all right, we'll turn this into Air Force One. We'll take this gift on the behalf of American government from the Qatari royal family, and we'll turn it into Air Force One. He's like, we'll turn it into Air Force One for the next 3 years while I'm president, and then it's mine. Some bullshit presidential library. Somehow it's going to be a part of the presidential library. Like, what the fuck? They're not going to have the presidential library on this fucking on this jet, right? I mean, it's just a total loophole. And he's just so fucking brash about this. Joe Biden and every one of these other scumbag politicians wish they could do the same exact thing. But Trump does it. Like, they wish they could do it. It's so fucking, it looks so bad, but Trump doesn't give a shit how bad he's just such a grifter, and he's to be able to sell these motherfuckers. And Trumpers, I mean, the ones that aren't pro-Israel are still going to fucking back his ass, right? And it's, this is what, at least for Trump, he's doing what they all would do. Like, they're all sleazy as him, but Trump is just more sleazy, and he's more open about it. I mean, then that's hilarious. Like, it's hilarious he just took a fucking $400 million plane and for himself, just right out in front of everybody. It's like clearly a bribe, and it's just what do you have to give back for that 400? I don't know, but it's not me giving it back. It's the American government, right? And so whatever breaks the Qataris are going to get is going to come out of your pocket, and he just totally fucking took advantage of his position. And I mean, even these people, and of course, some of these people are, they have dual citizenship or whatever, and they're pissed about it because of those reasons. But they're, these hardcore Trumpers have to, I say, wait a minute, this is just beyond sleazy, right? And Trump's like, fuck you, I don't care, I'm taking it. Like, wouldn't you take a $400 million plane? So that's a classic Trump thing. Okay, so I had at least one comment that I wanted to read here. Someone clearly clueless who doesn't know me. But the person writes, we have to get past this mentality you shared in the beginning. This, I'm above doing those types of jobs. Do you know you are literally admitting that you would own slaves if you lived during the slave era? That's such a stupid take. None of us are above the physical labor, and more white men especially should be doing physical labor. Demanding jobs, physically labor demanding jobs. It would cut depression and substance abuse in white men in half overnight. And this was a Trump turning liberals and MSN into truthers. And so what I was talking about is that manufacturing jobs suck, and nobody in America would do them, right? So this is what the person's commenting on. And I'm totally right about that. But the person doesn't know me, right? Because I do primary labor all the time and I enjoy it. I just came in, I'm doing shit ton of farm work. I have a little video. I found a black rat snake. I'll put it at the end of this video here. After this, hopefully I'll remember it. I'll do it right after I'm done with this voiceover. I got to download it and all that. And, it's something I enjoy doing. I do farm work. And I have made, this whole channel was about me and my family doing farm work. And so to accuse me of not doing primary labor is silly. And I believe everyone should do farm work or do outdoor work because you get vitamin D. And it's healthy and it's fun. And I love doing it. I didn't want to come inside. It's a fucking gorgeous day. I had to finish this stupid video and read dumbass comments like this. But the other piece to this is, we had servants in India when we were there. And I kind of needed to have them. My ex left, and before that we had one. Everybody had them there. We paid this one woman $70 a month, and she would cook a meal for us in the morning. And she was overcharging us. She was psyched to do it. She was loving, there was a ton of money for her. She probably lived in some hut somewhere. Nice lady, didn't speak much English. She cooked a meal for us in the morning, and they'd clean the house, right? Every 6 days a week. Like some days she just wouldn't show up. And, you know, it was what it was. And my kids had learned to do farm work, and all of them did chores. And I wasn't psyched about getting a servant, but I was just under so much stress and pressure. I'm not somebody who's good at cleaning, you know, whatever it is. I mean, I can do it, but it's not. And my kids can do it, you know, the whole thing. But, you know, it was something we needed to do. But I didn't like it. Like, I didn't like it. I didn't think it was good for the kids because, like I said, we had trained them to do chores and, you know, all these things. But, you know, if I had my choice, I wouldn't want servants and that kind of thing because, you know, I don't like asking people to do things for me, and I like doing things for myself. I don't like to be waited on. I'm not that kind of person. And, you know, I don't feel good about supervising people. It's a whole thing. It's a little stressful for me, right? But we do all have slaves. If you have an iPhone, you're buying an iPhone from slave masters who exploit people in these very poor countries. Like every person who's importing goods from these, you know, people who are working slave labor, basically, in these manufacturing plants, right? But they are poor people who this is their jobs, the best jobs they could do. They could also work outside in agricultural type situation. They're not capable of abstract thought. There are people who just don't have the brain power to do, you know, white collar labor. They don't have the ability to go to college. They just don't have it. They don't have, you know, don't have the education. Some of them have grown up in poverty. They don't have the soul development to do some of these things. But I think everybody should do primary labor because it's good for you. It's healthy in these things, right? But this guy misinterpreted what I was saying because manufacturing jobs are not primary labor. Manufacturing jobs are always going to be almost like a form of slavery. I mean, there are plenty of jobs I can't do. I couldn't be president. I couldn't be corporate executive. I worked as a janitor. I woke up at 5 a.m. and opened a town building and scrubbed toilets, right? You know, I worked in treatment centers with sex offenders, which is a fucking brutal job, right? I've done, you know, work that people would consider dirty. Like I made an earth oven using cow dung, right? Like, you know, I used to pick the cow dung up, you know, scoop it into a wheelbarrow and turn it into manure, all those kind of jobs, right? All the things that we did on the farm. We used to milk cows for 6 years. And I like those things. I like doing physical labor. As you get older, though, you can only do so much. You tire out. It's hard for me to, like, when I have to bend over for a while, like, you know, especially since COVID, it's gotten a lot better than it was. But it's just not, you know, you're not able to do the same amount of physical labor. But either way, my point about manufacturing jobs, it's a toxic environment. Oftentimes coal mining and all that shit and things like that, and those, you know, manufacturing jobs. And Americans just don't have the desperation in them to do that kind of work. And, you know, maybe they should. I mean, that's, you know, you can make a debate about whether, you know, everybody should do some of these jobs just so they get it, right? They understand how hard these things are. But, you know, that's not the case, right? These holier-than-thou people that talk about everyone else, and this might not be a white person, given by the way he said, you know, these things about white people. You know, him saying this stuff here. There's such a stupid take. None of us are above physical labor, and more white men especially should be doing physical demanding jobs. It would cut depression and substance abuse in white men in half overnight. You know, so many white people that grow up in poverty, grow up in rural poverty and, you know, projects and trailer parks, you know, people like Eminem, Eminem in that movie, that 8 Mile movie, did manufacturing. There's lots of white people who do manufacturing jobs and are part of unions. If you're talking about white collar workers, you know, those people get an education for a reason. But there's some people that, you know, are not suited to those types of jobs, and really nobody is, and nobody wants them. And so my point was, the only people who are living in really desperate circumstances, living in fear, living in war-torn countries, living under gang violence and, you know, in some kind of, like a cartel type situation, will do that kind of work because they're already living in hell, so that's a step up for them. And, you know, that's true. Anyways, so there's another comment here from the robot, this bot that describes my videos. This video covers, this is the Hilaria says, her brain plus ADHD and dyslexia is why why she has two accents and something else here. This video covers various topics, including Hillary Baldwin's accent controversy, Draymond Green's behavior in basketball, the election of the first American Pope, and reflections on religion and spirituality. The creator also shares personal experiences and views on victim consciousness. I mean, the AI, what I want to say in my last video, that voiceover video, is, I like the AI, but they also are very prevalent, they're ass kissers. Like the AI tells you what you want to hear. And, there's too much of that shit, right? Like everybody is compromised in some way or another, like the powers that be, and even AI, to pander to fucking people's bullshit, right? The people are lying to themselves. And, it's something that, I covered this in a whole 2-hour video, but this is something I want to add to that. Like, I just can't do that because it's not right to do. I have to see it. I have to say it the way I see it. If I lose viewers, I piss people off. That's really their problem. Not because, I'm not doing it to do that. It's not because I want to piss people off. I'm doing it because they need to hear it somewhere. Like, no one else is going to tell them. They're going to surround themselves with people who tell them what they want to hear, and they're going to watch viewers, they're going to watch creators that agree with their belief system. That's what everybody does. And so no one's telling them the other point of view, or, when they're full of shit or not. And people are too fragile to admit they're full of shit and that they're wrong. And someday they might realize it, and they're not going to come back here and be like, you were right, and I'm, sorry, or whatever, or just say, I stopped watching you because you said this stuff, but now I realize you were right. Sometimes people do that. And, it would be good for them to do that more, because then that shows you have personal growth. And you kind of understand that you're full of shit, right? Anyways, I already realize that about myself. That's why I don't take my opinion seriously. I don't care. I just say things. But this person that left a comment, they're just interpreting something, misinterpreting through their prejudicial lens, and not taking all the information that's available on this YouTube channel to show I do primary labor. Let me tack this steak video on after this, but I'm going to say goodbye here. I'm going to do the gratefulness thing here, but there'll be a little clip afterwards, just sort of like a moment of zen. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely pointing for the apocalypse and the ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful. So I came out here and I found that there was a black rat snake under this tarp. It's probably about 4 feet long, totally not like a young adult one. I've seen more black rat snakes than probably any other snake, although we went to this park once where there's so many tiny little brown snakes, like garter snakes, that were just all going through. We saw hundreds in one day. But other than that, on the farm, this is the most prevalent snake. They're very beneficial as they eat rodents. They're non-venomous. I've captured a number of them, held them for a little bit. We had one as a pet for a while, and we let it go after about 5 months. That's some nice. Yeah, black rat snake.